Today I want to speak a little bit about well-being and wellness in the midst of this life that we face, and also to provide some practices together from a practical somatic lens in hopes that it would be of benefit to you, something that you can take in that's portable, and really get into practicing together. The first thing that I'd like to do, I'd like to begin in a way that I usually do, and that is invite you to bring the palms together over the heart. And only if this works for your body. And let's take a few deep breaths and just in this posture and attitude of gratitude. Take a few deep breaths, connect the palms of the hands to the heart. And an invitation to close the eyes here for a moment. Allow the breath to suffuse this gesture of hands touching heart, and allow a gentle bow, if available to you, of the head towards the hands and touching into this sacred listening. In this posture of sincerity, of gratitude. And just begin by asking some intention questions today. How is your heart today? And what is your heart's deepest intention at this moment? And what would you like to cultivate in our time together? Rest or care. It might be understanding, to learn and to awaken. It might be curious. And as you discover this intention for yourself for practice today, I invite you to set that as your north for practice, whatever that might be. It might be a phrase. May I be calm. May I be peaceful. And take a few more breaths in this way. May I be happy. And here I'll close with the words of the Radiant Sutras, and it's written, "There is a place in the heart where everything meets. And go there if you want to find me. Mind and senses and soul, eternity, all are there. Are you there? Enter the bowl of vastness that is the heart, and give yourself to it with total abandon. Once you know the way, the nature of attention will call you to return again and again and be saturated with knowing, I belong here, and I am at home here." Namaste, and thank you for your practice. When I see the word mindfulness as a superpower, it's kind of funny to me, but it truly is. And I also want to point towards that another power and another protector of our practice and of our well-being is when we come together and practice in community. And so I just want to invite you again, if your camera's on, and if your camera's off, I encourage you to turn it on and just take a moment to scroll through the pages if we can. And I know there are lots of folks here today. And it's no coincidence that we've all come to practice today. And as you see each other, you might want to mentally whisper each other's names. You also might want to ask, are you okay? Are you okay? How are you? How's your heart today? And just notice if the heart is expanded and if the heart is contracting when you ask that question. And so seeing each other, such an important part of practice, and knowing that we can't do it alone. That's a part of our well-being, is practicing together in community. And what I love about Sangha is when we get together, it's an opportunity for liberation to happen. Someone is going to be free of something today. And that's exciting, right? And that happens by our presence. It's such an important part of this. Our presence is our greatest gift we can give each other, particularly for our own well-being. And so there's so many ways, I'm reminded from the Hindu slant that every way is the right way. There's no wrong way. Your way is right and your way is right. And from a Hindu lens, when you talk about wellness, there's a list. There's yoga, there's pranayama, there's breathing, there's chanting, there's Ayurveda, diet, all of these things that point towards well-being or wellness. The Sufis look at it from a lens of practicing in a transcendental way, right? From a place of touching into divinity, then devotional, music, chanting, using sounds and mantras. Treating problems as guests. There's just so many different ways in. And so this, too, in the Buddhist psychology, the Buddha had begun with just the 4 foundations of mindfulness, right? And the first 2 being mindful of breath and mindful of body. And so when I hear the word well-being, I think of wellspring, right? That's the first thing that I think of. And I want to point towards something that, and these are the words of the Buddha, how the Buddha uses a wonderful metaphor. He uses this image that well-being is that of an underwater fountain in the bottom of the lake, which flows up and spreads new, refreshing water out into the lake. And that the idea that deep inside of us is this fountain, this spring of well-being that can well up and fill us. And that is always there. It's not something that is manipulated. It's a place that we can go to and we can get dipped into and recognize it's something that we carry with us all the time. It's also a sense of well-being that's not dependent upon what you want out of life, right? Like having $1 million or a great job or a brand new car, For many of us, the idea of success and happiness comes from external components. And so there is this sense that it's a very different kind of well-being, which is welling up from the inside out, right? It's not dependent upon the world being a certain way or in a particular way. And it's also not governed by our feelings or our thoughts and our emotions. And that's just a very important point to recognize, right? It's not something that we're doing or we're forcing. It's more of a getting out of the way, if that makes sense. And in the practice I'll lead today, it's more about staying in the spaces more than in the content of what is arising, right? And we'll get into that, right? For some of us, we might not quite get it right now, and that's okay. The Buddha would also point towards that in this wellspring, that once you experience it, that it brings about a great sense of joy, and it brings about a great sense of calm and contentment. And he encourages to experience that joy. Now, joy can be a big word for some people, right? But coming back to experience this joy, the Buddha would also say that joy is an equipment of the mind, right? And that this mind, that once the body and the mind is experiencing this deep absorption, then it can better investigate everything that is arising, right? And so it's a process of getting out of the way, right? It's a process of really diving deep beneath the layers of thought, beneath the layers of reactivity, beneath the layers of our conditioning, and to touch into this still point which is there, and which is always there. And the more we practice, the more we get dipped into this, the more we have a better recollection that it's always there for us, right? No matter what's arising. And so it's a revolutionary thing, that we can bring our focus to something that's greater than our preoccupation or that our details of our life as they are. Part of meditation, too, is not to become so involved in what is arising. And that's an important part of practice. And so powers. Mindfulness is a superpower. You know, there are 5 spiritual powers in the Buddhist tradition, and that is, they're called indriyas, right? 5 indriyas. And they are, one is faith or confidence, right? Faith or confidence is the first. The other is an energy, an effort, right? The third is mindfulness as a power, right? And those 3 beget samadhi, concentration. But it's not the kind of concentration which is forced, it's the kind of concentration which is a calm concentration, composed concentration. And from this, the 5th, wisdom arises, right? The practice that we're going to lead today, you can imagine it as we are planting a pillar of calm and of a composed heart and of a composed energy in the body to be able to cross the flood of our mind or to cross the flood of our lives. And this is a very important part. The Buddha would even say, if you can perfect the first 4 foundations of mindfulness, mindful of breath, mindful of body, mindful of mind states, and so on and so forth, then all of the other 7 factors of enlightenment, all of these things seem to fall into place. But due to our conditioning and due to this world that we live, we tend to move at a velocity where we don't just sit with our breathing enough, for example, right? It's like, okay, I want to move on to the next thing. And the breath can teach you so much. And so these are important points before we get into a somatic practice, right? And so when I think of mindfulness as a superpower, we have to be careful with the words that we use, and mindfulness sometimes can feel like a mind that's full, and then we'd like to get clever, you know. I used to think of mindfulness as heartfulness was a better way to describe it. But as a musician, I like to describe it as listening, and it's a love listening, right? In Pali, there's a word called sutta, and sutta, which means heard, right? Not sutta like a verse from the scriptures with S-U-T-T, but S-U-T-A. And why listening is such an important part of practice and touching into this well-being is back in the day of the Buddha, they never wrote anything down. And so the ability to listen in a way where the heart recorded it was such an important part of the practice. It's almost as if you're listening to your favorite song and how your favorite song makes you feel. And all of a sudden you forget, things kind of strip away and fall away, and you fall into this vibration that's different. And so I love to use that word, listening, right? As such a very important part. And as a society, we've been experiencing this contagion of fear since the pandemic, and maybe earlier on, for sure earlier on. And it's also a contagion of velocity and speed, and this sense of pushing through, right? Even the idea of well-being and the idea of self-care, we're opposed against. We don't give ourselves enough time to sit. There's a sense of opposition towards it. And so this sense of listening is such an important part, right, of practice. It's a returning back to nature, returning back to your naturalness. There's a wonderful saying, and I think it's Victor Hugo, that says, the wise know when to stop. And that's another important part of listening, right? Listening for the needs. Poet Rupi Kaur writes, you know, I woke up thinking the work was done. I would not have to practice today. How naive to think healing was that easy. When there's no end in point, no finish line to cross, healing is everyday work. And so, in order to heal, our systems have to be cleared, right? And I'm reminded of how the practice of meditation is there's a joke that Tara would say, that I've heard her say before, it's like meditation, it's not what you think, right? It's an embodied practice, right? She would fold back in the body, make the U-turn, you know, with rain practice, coming back and touching into the body. For some of us, you know, it's so deep, it's deeply ingrained that if we don't listen clearly, it's hard to listen clearly when our bodies are hijacked by the most primitive parts of our brain, which is the limbic area, the limbic system. And when our frontal cortex is offline, and mindfulness is not there, or listening is not there, we're operating in this hyper state of fight, flight, or freeze, as you may have heard. So somatic practice, I found, is very, very important. It was something that I found 20 years ago when my dad died of a sudden stroke, and I had to take care of my mother, who was blind and legally blind and diabetic amputee. And it was one of these things where my body was reacting in such a way that I couldn't control it. My left arm was always had tremors. I felt like I was having a heart attack. And it was all of these things that were happening inside that I couldn't seem to regulate my nervous system. And so these are practices today just to point towards well-being and touching into this wellspring that I want to invite you all today to experience. So somatic practice, right? These practices are based in 3 components. The first one being breath, the second one grounding, and the third neutrality. And I'll talk about each of them briefly and we'll practice a little bit. And so breathing, right? I can hear my yogi in Kriya Yoga say, as is the mind, so is the breath. As is the breath, so is the mind. And in many spiritual practices, there are many different breaths for your emotions, for the attitudes you might have. And so the breath and the mind are mirrors to each other. Right? When the breath is relaxed and the breath is controlled, the mind is relaxed. It falls into a much more even and balanced state. When the mind is out front and agitated, then the breath might be tight or holding a breath. You might find yourself constantly exhaling out loud. And so bringing those things in the somatic practice is aligning and bringing these things in concert so that we can arrive at this settled state, right? That's such an important part of the somatic practice. The second is grounding, finding our feet, having a sense of being rooted and heavy. In Tai Chi, there's a wonderful analogy of grounding, by bending the knees, feeling the earth beneath our feet, wiggling of the toes, finding our feet, and just staying heavy. And the concept is that it's like a tree that cannot be uprooted. So when the winds of life come, when there's loss and when there's anger, there's this sense of being rooted and being heavy. Usually when we are not settled, there's a sense of energy rising. It rises to the shoulders. It rises in the limbic area. And then you can be moved by something someone said or being maybe cut off in traffic, a comment. So many things start to happen when you're not grounded. So finding our ground, finding our feet. And then the third is that once we've arrived at grounding, there's a sense of neutrality, where the mind and the body's in concert, and the sense of boundary. Now you get a sense of safety. There's the animality of a side of ourselves is in a place where it feels calm and composed and safe. And we can recognize this is a space for to create healthy boundaries for ourselves, for others, also to live from a place of moderation, right? To listen in a way that we're not causing harm to ourselves or causing harm to others. So it's such an important 3 points to remember. Breath regulates mind, coming into a sense of grounding, finding our feet, becoming heavy, right, and settled, and then arriving at this settled ground, this neutral ground. One more thing before we sit together. They're not just physical exercises. Right? They're not just exercises for health, right? They are practices in listening and intimacy, right? And so back to listening as mindfulness, listening in a way that's beyond the linguistic mind, beyond words, beyond your emotions. It's pointing towards the middle way, as the Buddha would point towards, right? A place that's more concentrated, a place that's more spacious, and void of this need of want or this need of self or I, me, or mine. And so a few pointers is not to be so fast, or to be too successful with it too, right? It takes time, right? And when it does happen, to feel the joy and the goodness that's there and that comes with it, right? It's not dependent upon the details of your life. It's always there. It's always there for you. I'm reminded of the words of the Buddha, where the Buddha would say, "Oh, nobly born, remember who you truly are." And so with that, let's begin. It's going to be a little bit different than you're used to, and only if it works for your body. And if, for those wearing glasses, I would suggest you take them off for a moment. And we'll begin with eyes open and invite you to bring the palms together. And here, let's just begin to rub the hands for warmth. Yeah. Keep the eyes open here. And you might notice, like already for me, I have a deep sigh, right? The body will, if we listen in a way beyond language, as if we would a child or a baby, you'll notice the body might sigh, it might begin to swallow, and those are all signs of resetting, right? And gentle massage of the fingers now. Good. Keeping eyes open here. There might be a yawn reflex here, and that's all signs of returning back to nature, right? And bringing the frontal cortex back online. We'll take our fingers, spread them out, and shake the fingers at our sides. Good. And many here who have practiced with me before have done this with me. And here I invite you to take the right hand. We'll place the right hand on the forehead. Left hand on the base of the skull where it meets the spine. And gentle rotations here as you begin to massage this area. And this area of the body which we mistake ourselves for ourselves, like we think this is who we are, from this place. Good. And here, let's pause here and take a few deep breaths into the frontal cortex, the forehead, and into the base of the spine. Deep breath as if you're guiding the breath up into the palms of the hands and out through the mouth. And just resetting here. Deep breath. Good. One more breath this way. Good. And now with the right hand, we'll leave the left hand on the base of the neck. We'll bring the right hand to the base of the neck and begin rubbing the neck down in a downward motion. You can use me as a model here. And here you can do this with eyes open or closed. And as you do this, I invite you to raise your heels and walk your feet in place. And finding our feet, finding the ground. And just all resetting the limbic area, bringing our frontal cortex back online, just sensing this sinking feeling as we rub downward. You might sense tingling in your calves and your thighs, which is all normal. Good. And now bringing the massage to the front of the neck and the sides of the neck in a downward motion. You can include the space around the ears and downward. And sending a signal to our nervous system to ground, to root. Good. And from here now, we can cross the arms. If it works for your body, beginning to massage the upper back. And now the shoulders. And let's pause at the shoulders here and take a few deep breaths into the palms of the hands. And exhaling down into the feet. And when you exhale, mouth open, walk the feet in place. Connect with your feet. Can you find your feet? Find the ground. Good. And here, continue the massage. Biceps and triceps, upper arm. You can do it one arm at a time, or how I'm doing it. The forearms. Back down to the hands, and once you've arrived at the hands, we'll take the palms of the hands and begin to rub the sides of the rib cage down towards the sit bones in a downward motion, and the lower back down towards the sit bones, rubbing in a downward motion, rubbing the kidney area. And here, I invite you to walk your feet again. There's a direct connection to the ground and the balls and the soles of the feet and the kidney region. Element of wood, of grounding. Good. Rubbing into the sit bones. And here let's take the left hand. We'll place the left hand on the belly. Right hand on the chest. And here, gentle rotations of the hand over the heart, over the chest as you hold the belly. And allow any long exhales to come out here. Let go. Allow the shoulders to fall away from the ears. And sensing the sinking feeling. Every time you exhale, sensing this grounding into the seat or the cushion. Pause the massage of the heart. And a few deep breaths as if you can catch the breath in the palms of the hands. Inhale deeply. Exhale into the sit bones, into the weight of the body. Good. Inhale deeply. Exhale into the pelvis, into the weight, becoming heavy. Inhale deeply. Last time, exhale. Moving the right hand now over left on the belly. Allow the shoulders to fall away from the ears. And softening the belly and receiving this next breath in a soft belly. Exhale. And really it's an invitation with each exhale to sense the weight of the body. You might sense heat where the body's making connection on the seat or the cushion. Or if you're lying down, you might sense heat on the back side of the body. You want to come in contact with the exhale and a sense of sinking deeper and touching into this wellspring of calm that's here. And before we continue, I invite you to come back to your intention to practice, to cultivate, whatever that phrase was for you today. And as you do, on the in-breath, imagine this intention filling up your lungs and filling up the belly and suffusing the body from head to toe down into the belly and into the feet. Peaceful, peaceful, or if the word is calm, calm. Allow the practice. And one last movement here. We'll bring the palms again together over the heart. And we'll rub the hands for warmth. And beginning at the tops of the thighs, rubbing downward towards the knees and wiggling the toes at the same time. Rubbing the tops of the thighs downward as if you're kneading bread and circling outward. Good. The sides of the legs. And walking the feet in place, finding your feet. When you arrive at the knees, gentle massage of the knees. And take a few moments just to pause the massage at the knees. Allow the shoulders to fall away from the ears. And gentle wiggle of the toes here. You might sense awareness filling up this body as a clear pool, still water. And for those of us finding the mind still agitated, that's okay. Come back to the breath. It might be helpful to place the right hand on the forehead, left hand on the base of the skull, the limbic area, and just gentle massage of this area. A few deep breaths. And here offering the phrase for practice, may I be open, may I be balanced, may I be peaceful. May I be well, may I be calm, may I be at ease. And give yourself permission to leave your concerns at your feet. You can pick them up later. A few more deep breaths in this manner. How is your heart now? And perhaps something has shifted from when you first began. Have you noticed? There's a place in the heart where everything meets. And go there if you want to find me. Mind, senses, soul, eternity, all are there. Are you there? Enter the bowl of vastness that is the heart. And give yourself to it with total abandon. And once you know the way, the nature of attention will call you to return again and again. And be saturated with knowing, I belong here. I am at home here. Namaste, friends. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your willingness. And take a moment to come back. And just for those folks who I can see here, I'll put my glasses on. How are we doing? Are we okay? Just nod of heads? All right. Good. All right. Yeah, good. See some thumbs up there. See smiles. See some friends. Good to see you. Hey, all right. And so that was a really quick, just way of exploring that, right? And dependent upon, there's one thing that I wanted to close with. The wonderful thing about touching into these spaces and these practices is that, particularly in the first four foundations of mindfulness, the Buddha's not only offering a sense of touching into this wellness or well-being or listening, he's also giving you a glimpse as to teaching you what style of thinker you are, what style of feeler you are, how you are meeting the present moment, right? How, if your awareness is like glasses, right? If your awareness are colored with memory, or if it's colored with fear, or if it's colored with anxiety, and how you're touching the moment. And so understanding that too is another important part of the somatic practice as to where to begin. So for those who ruminate all the time, it's very good to begin at the lower neck and at the top of the skull, tapping to a lot of things that you can do with the head, right? And entering this way. For those of us who are strange and not really feeling too flash or really disconnected and not connected at all, beginning with the feet, massaging the soles of the feet, beginning with the calves, and entering through another way where it evokes just the tiniest of sensations, right? We're not looking for large moves. We're looking for small moves. In these practices, simplicity opens the door to depth. And that's such an important part of our practice. And so much to say on it. And I know we've about 20 minutes left, and I'm curious to hear just any insights or wisdom from the room or any questions. And just deep bows to you all. And just thank you for being here, and thank you for your willingness to practice. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you so much, David. That was beautiful. Thank you. And I love that Caroline asked the same question that came up for me. You mentioned, getting into our breath and then grounding and then neutrality. And so she's asking, is that the same as equanimity? So feel free to unmute yourself and say hello to David.
Hi, David. Thanks for this beautiful practice. I've never done a somatic practice before. So yeah, that was great. Yes, you mentioned the 3 aspects of somatic practice, and the one that I had a question with is neutrality. I don't remember the exact words you used, but I immediately thought of equanimity, and I don't know if it's the same or similar, or it has a different color, let's say. I'm not sure.
I love the question. And yeah, it's funny, like once as you're doing it, the mind's coming back on, it comes back online, and it's like, what is that? Like I want more of that. Like I'll take 12 of those, like it does starts to do that too. So it's a wonderful question. The middle way, right? Some people equate the middle way with equanimity, but the middle way has a little bit to be able to stand in the face of life as it is, has a strength to it, right? So it's this energy of focus, concentration, but that's soft and that's calm at the same time. Right? So how I sense one as an energetic embodiment, right? And as an action. And in my experience, how equanimity too, it's similar. But equanimity, when it pops up with joy and mudita and metta, they're all like holograms, right? Mm. And so they have a little bit of all of them in there without feeling indifferent. What starts to happen is, and here's a play on words, when you arrive at that neutrality, it's a sense of dispassionate passion. Right? Mm. You might hear passionately dispassionate. And there's something about that, right? There's a sense of you love it so much that you love it in the way that you know that if I attach to it or love it too much, it's going to hurt me. Did that make sense? So
kind of. I'm just like taking it in, see what happens.
So how can I explain it better? There's a sense of with the neutrality, the mind and the body is on the same page. And the order in which things are meeting the experience is a little bit more space, right? And from that ground, there is joy, there is metta, there is equanimity. Does that make sense? One is a precursor to the other.
Yeah. Okay.
You arrive to it. Does that make sense? And you notice that it's there. It's always been here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Hope that was helpful. Yeah.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Our next question is from Eduardo, who asks about resources that you might recommend to help us better understand and integrate somatic work into practice. Eduardo, feel free to unmute yourself. And
Eduardo, good to see you again, my friend.
Good to see you, David. Good to see everybody here. What a joy. Um, yeah, so the more I get into my practice, which is mostly mindfulness, the more I realize that after having some success settling the mind and not getting caught up in all the stories and narratives, um, there is some work to be done that's beyond words and thoughts, and it's very much about my body. And so I've gotten involved in like trauma work and Judith Blackstone's work and other things. But I just sense that it's interesting because even though I'm more settled than I've ever been, there's also a shakiness that I'm in touch with, that I believe the key to to better dealing with it is through body work, through somatic work. And I don't know much about it except being mindful of body and doing some intuitive things, which like putting my hand on my heart and doing some tapping or things of that nature. So I'd like a little guidance of how to better understand somatic work and integrate it into my practice. I just sense it's so key to unlocking, what's needed for me.
Yeah. Eduardo, I first off, we've practiced together many times, and just always a joy to see your face and to practice with you. And also, just love what you're bringing to it and just your awareness around it. And it sounds like to me the progress of the practice is moving in a way that there's a path activity, right? And you're becoming aware of what's next, what is needed. And so that listening is such an important component, right? So I love that. I also want to remind everyone, and you too, I've heard this from a wonderful teacher by the name of Thomas Davis. He'd say, we're all contemplative artists, right? And so we're all finding different ways to different modalities that work with us. And that's the beautiful thing about these communities and these practices. And this recognition that words do fall short, that book smart does fall short, right? That our collecting and accumulating does harm us more than actually emptying out. And so those are all important things to recognize, like moving into the body, how to shift. And if it's a rain practice, that's a wonderful way. And then for some of us who are more exploratory, I need to really get in there and to touch, viscerally what it is. And we'll notice the more we practice in somatic practice, certain things begin to loosen. And we might not have an answer for it. And you might sense tears, you might sense the shakiness, you might sense certain kinds of phenomenon that are part of it, right? All normal for different people. They're different things. I lost my train of thought for a second, but coming back to what you're saying, there are some things we already know intuitively what to do. Right? We are our own teacher, and discovering what that is, right? Recently, I began to do this again. It was just something for me that really helped me just settle, or paying attention to the lungs where there's grief and there's things that are tied into it. Something starts to happen as we move through those modalities, and these modalities are starting to shift. There's so many different ways. If it's okay, Emily, to mention a wonderful teacher here by the name of Pawan Bareja, who I studied with many years. Pawan is a wonderful somatic teacher too. Someone that you could see, and another person too that I want to bring to mind, and she's like an elder for us. Her name is Margarita Loinais. Margarita Lonoyes. And Margarita is very much into the earth and mineral element and working with the body in a different way. Different practices, but they're two people that instead of sending you off with some sort of link, it offers someone who embodies that and can practice that. And they've been a great benefit in my life, in my practice. And then one thing that I want to add is then knowing when. That's an important part. Sometimes the sitting practice won't work, and you have to stand up, right? You have to move. So it's the wise know when to stop. And so I hear that in your sharing with me. I hope some of that, there was something in that for you that was of benefit, yeah? So, and I can point some more, Emily, if I can, some resources online for our friends too, if they wish, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was curious about Marguerite's last name, how you would spell it.
Yeah, Loinaz.
Okay, perfect. But yes, we can also add this later.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next question is from Kate, who asks, how would you recommend responding to your own feelings of guilt around your seeming inability to establish a consistent meditation practice? Kate, go ahead and say hello to David.
Hi, David.
Hi,
Thank you so
Kate.
much for the practice you led us through. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome, Kate. And yeah, and I hear you. You know, there's a bunch of ways to deal with it, right? At the same time, you know, Jack Kornfield would use humor, right? You know, he would say, "Thank you for your opinion," you know, when that would happen. So that's another thing, just watching you laugh, right? So it's important, right, is to know that humor is a very important part of it, right, too, right? Not to take yourself so seriously. But when that should and that could have and practicing and that whole thing, there's a sense of when we come to practice that our whole life is at stake, right? There's a whole sense of that. And that's okay. I used to come to practice in that way and thinking to myself, I don't want to die, right? I used to come to practice thinking that way. And it might begin that way. But then as I began in my experience with practice, I recognized that it wasn't a quantity thing more than it was quality. You know, and not to butcher the words of the Buddha would say something, if you can practice in this way for 24 hours, you have 24 hours of peace. If you can practice in this way for an hour, you have an hour of peace. If you can practice this way for a minute, then you have a minute of peace. If you can practice this way for one breath, you have one breath of peace. All of those are good, right? And so what I'm getting at is that the quality, just this one breath, to keep your aspiration simple when it becomes to the practice, right? That's a very important thing. Keep aspiration simple, and it's one breath to the next, right? Not living 5 minutes from now or an hour from now, right? It might be too scary. Tomorrow might be too scary, right? The next 10 minutes might be too scary. Just stay in that one breath at a time. How to translate that off of the cushion is to keep that same sort of rhythm as you move through the day, right? That's another way. But let's come back to the practical practice, right? That's an important part. And maybe for you, and this is not a fix or a diagnosis, it's not psychotherapy or any of those things. But I found that a practice that Gil Fronsdale, a wonderful teacher, mentor of mine, would use the word just. Just thought. Just guilt. Just judgment. Yeah, just sitting. Just laughing. Right? Just movement. Or another wonderful teaching from Jonathan Faust would be, is happening. Judgment is happening. But there's a way to sit in your wellspring and see it that way. And to, sadness is happening. Right? So there's this sense of that, right? I love in the Irish community, they have a saying, a sadness has fallen upon me. I love that. Right? It's not this I am so attached to it, right? There's some space around that, knowing that this is what's happening right now. And that it's okay to happen right now. And I don't want it to, and oh yeah, there's aversion. Yeah, that's happening too. Yeah, see, that's happening too. And right away, there's a little bit of space. It's like when you're moving through a crowded room, you can't walk through it as your shape. You have to kind of knife through. You have to kind of knife through. And so we're sort of, where does the water flow here? It flows this way. Okay, so that's what it is. Right? It's when we pay attention to what is solid and make it even more solid that we feel stuck. So there's a foot on the gas and a foot on the brake at the same time. Right? You want to, and then at the same time you can't. And so it's important to stay in the spaces more than the content. Does that make sense? More than the content of what is arising. So you can do it right now with your breath. Let's do it together, right? So this is what we're going to do. We're going to keep our eyes open as we do this. You're going to breathe with me at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Inhale. Hold the breath. Exhale. Pause. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. A few more breaths this way, and stay in the pauses. Stay in the pauses. Stopping. Stop. Breathe. And stop. Exhale. And stop. Right? Just a way to subtly understand, use that example as a template for your thoughts. That in between the thoughts, there are these spaces and these gaps. And where might they be? Recognize it and stay there and watch. So, hope that was of benefit to you, my friend. Yeah.
How do you feel about one more question, or where are you?
Sure.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Margaret Ann, who asks, for those of us who tend to be high energy and kinetic, what somatic practice can help us settle, especially to do a seated meditation? Go ahead and unmute yourself and say hello to David.
Hello, David.
Margaret. So good.
I'm your squirrely little friend who could so much energy, and I love to sit, but sometimes to get there,
Yeah.
I need to come down in energy.
Yeah.
I do practice qigong. Maybe there's some of that I should be using, but how do I bring it down? I know there are people who want more energy. I'm not one of them.
Right.
So I would love your help with that.
That's a wonderful question, Margaret. And, there is a shaking of the bottle, that has to happen first so that it settles, right? And so for someone like yourself, like you're mentioning that, I would point towards begin by standing and incorporate a little bit of standing meditation for a little while. And having just a slight bend of the knee, so there's a bounce, right? So that sometimes there's this bouncing, but then there's also this shaking and wiping away. In Qigong and in Tai Chi, there are different movements, right? You might have seen this movement a lot, this circling in, which we've done in our groups, right? So it has a sense of neutralizing and returning back to earth, right? There's another one that goes the opposite way, that releases and opens out, right? And then sometimes we have to, Jonathan has this one where he uses the hands like butterflies. He shakes that one hand lower, one hand higher, and they begin to move, and he starts to amp up. He starts to run in place. And he does this thing where all the muscles are engaged, right? And then he sits. So I would suggest it's something from a standing posture, right? Where it involves the waist, it involves bending the knees, swinging the arms back and forth. And that sense of shaking the bottle before you sit. It might also be a walking meditation, right? Because for some of us who are a high energy, to sit still is like trying to stop a train, that's going at 200 miles an hour. You just can't put the brakes on it, right? So you got to kind of, govern it little by little. And so I maybe perhaps that is the intention, right? Is to not sitting still for a while. And maybe it's a walking meditation where you move and then you stop and you stand and you sit still and let it settle. And then you move again. And then at some point you come back to a seated posture. Last thing I want to say is, and I know we've known each other for a while now, we're all different. And so if someone's sitting there like a Buddha, sitting straight up, it's like it looks different for different people, right? Right? Be who you are, right? So if you have to walk and meditate, that's what you do. I love my dear mentor and friend La Sarmiento, they would say, I'm not a sitter. I meditate when I'm in the shower. I meditate when I walk, right? I meditate when I'm on my bike. And so that's what I'm pointing at, right? Be who you are. It might look a certain way, and for them, each by their own merit. For you, it will look a certain way. And that's an important thing too, right? For your practice. Send your love, my friend, as always. It's always good to see you. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Emily.
Yes, I'm just giving it back to you, really. Thank you so much. We've had a couple people ask about the poem, if you're willing to share about
Sure.
that.
Can I put it in the chat here?
Sure.
Yeah, here we go. And I'm going to place it in the chat for everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So, everyone. Yeah. Alrighty. And so I guess I'll close here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So friends, just so good to spend this time with you. I wish we had more time, because it's such a deep and rich subject, and just so I'm so grateful to you all just for this time together. And in the usual fashion that I like to practice, let us offer the merits of our practice, and let us bring our palms together, bring our hands back towards the heart as we started. And let us offer the merits of our practice. May the merits of our practice not only be of benefit to ourselves, but may they be of benefit to all beings in all directions. We practice in honor of all those who've lost their lives at the hands of war, Palestinian families, Israeli families, those who are homeless, fleeing persecution, those without food, those without shelter, all those throughout history, the Ukraine, generations past that have lost so much at the hands of war and violence and systems of oppression. We practice in honor of our children. May our children be safe and free from all harm. We practice in honor of women and women's lives and women's rights in all directions. We practice in honor of our wisest and brightest ancestors. We practice in honor of the earth, plant, animal, and mineral. And may all beings, without exception, be filled with love and kindness. May all beings be well, peaceful, calm, and at ease. My prayer for you is that may you be well. May you be happy. And may this be so. Namaste. Deep bows, friends. Thank you for your practice today. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, feel free to unmute yourselves and say goodbye, and thank you to David.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, David.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
David.
much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Metta to
Thank you.
all.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, David.
Yes,
Beautiful to
yes.
see everyone.
David. Love you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.